Welcome in, Bassmaster fans, to another episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore, and my guy, as always, Kyle Jessie, the digital content editor for Bassmaster.com. And today we have a different kind of podcast with a special guest right off the top. This is going to be kind of our pattern of the month segment. We're going to do early each month. We're going to drop a pattern to help you Bassmaster fans become better anglers and kind of understand the fish that we are targeting. And so today's guest for the month of May is Jason Christie. Jason, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are doing fantastic. And Kyle and I were talking about this, and this was an idea we kind of brought up on every single month to maybe have an Elite Series pro or an angler kind of explain what the fish are doing, whether it's regionally up north, down south, in the Midwest, what they're doing in this specific month for the most part to help people be able to catch more fish. And so, and I said, why don't we kick this off in May? I just went back through every May tournament we had on the opens or elite level, and I screenshotted the top 10. And I said, dang, I am seeing a name quite a bit. And so I'm going to go ahead, Kyle, and I'll get your reaction as well as Jason's. But since 2013, and I'm going to consider late April, like something like April 24th to 28th, whatever, that's almost May. And sometimes the weather dictates that it is May, and even consider maybe the first week of June. But from the late April to early June, since 2013, Jason Christie has 9 top 10s, 2 wins. I think over half of those top 10s are top 5s, and you've done it from everywhere from Arkansas to Texas to Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Alabama. And you probably know all of your stats and history, but it is kind of, when you write it out, including the TTBC events, the one that we had in the spring there, it is pretty diverse bodies of water. Real quick, Bull Shoals, Dardanelle, Lake Fork, Arkansas River out of Muskogee, Sam Rayburn, Kentucky Lake, Lake Travis, Neely Henry, and Gunnersville. So, Jason, first question. Why do you and the month of May vibe so well? Especially, let's just keep it in that region, that Alabama to Texas and a couple states right above it.
Which is all we fish, you know what I mean, in the month of May. It's not like we go north in the month of May. So, I think to start it, lately I've mentioned that pre-spawn is my favorite time. But I will say that month of May is pretty important as well. And I think the big thing, it just comes down to the fish are still on the bank. No matter where we go, there's some things that start happening. Those fish start moving deep. Some of the tournaments that you mentioned were deep water events where I actually caught them deep. But I think the biggest thing is they're predictable that month of May. They've been on the bank, and a lot of them are garden fry. There's still some spawning going on. But the biggest thing is they're predictable, because if you pull up to the bank and they're not there, the first ledge outside that spawning pocket's where they're going to be at. I think that's the big deal is I can kind of guess where they're going to be at. And it's still, even though it's not my favorite time of the year, it's still, I have a lot of fun fishing in that 6-week period that we're talking about.
So, Jason, you kind of mentioned this just then, but you've been pretty outspoken in a lot of spawning, sight fishing type tournaments that you don't want to do that. That's not necessarily your preferred way of catching them that time of year. Is there any truth to the fact that, like you mentioned, in May, those fish are still shallow, but you don't have to catch them looking at them? You can catch them power fishing, doing the kind of things that you like to do. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I love sight fishing. I mean, I really do. I love sight fishing when there's not money on the line. I mean, I can remember, I would be doing it this week, but it's raining, the lake's flooded.
Every day, yeah.
Every day. I love doing it, but it's, you look back at the events, other than what Drew did a month or so ago, just never really, the sight fishing hardly ever wins from start to finish. And I like doing it. And I can remember a lot of events where I just go fishing. If I come across one that I can catch, I catch it. But I just, I don't get into the running, looking, marking waypoints, because what happens is it's kind of like a Kentucky Lake ledge event. You start that morning with, I'm going to go to waypoint 7, and then I'm going to go to 5, and then I'm just going to work my way down. Well, everybody else can see the same thing you can for the most part. Unless these fish are coming just every day, it just turns into a stressful, and you got to catch them. It's the plan has to go perfect for one day, and then you try to make it go for 4 days. I've not seen it happen. And I think that I do better just fishing. And some of the best sight fishing events that I've ever had, I mean, my dad and I can remember fishing on Grand Lake one event, and it was one of the most fun days I've ever had. Caught everything looking at him. My dad never picked up a fishing rod because he just held the net. But I came across every one of them as I was fishing. We didn't run from one fish to the next. I just got in a pocket, took off down the bank. Hey, I want to catch that one. I want to catch that one. But in a 4-day event, it just doesn't go that way. And you guys know that when I go to an event, I try to win 10, for the most part. I don't win. I lose way more than I win. So it just doesn't work out, even though it's fun, and I may, I can remember the Gunnersville event, I think it was last year. I caught a lot of those fish sight fishing. They weren't on bed.
That's what
They were wolf packing and chasing brim and stuff like that. But I could fish. And then as I was fishing, I would look and catch one. The biggest thing to me is, to answer your question, is I just don't think it very often wins events.
Well, what's funny that you say, and maybe you can explain it a little bit more, but you said that in May, it seems like fish are predictable, but yet May is oftentimes where we encounter maybe the post-spawn funk, and those fish, it's just like you hit it and the fish are either really skinny that you're catching, or they're in between. They're either on the bank or they're going, like you said, to that first drop or that first deep spot near there. And that's where they're wanting to go to. So sometimes you can hit it where it's just no man's land. But for those times of the year, I mean, how do you just commit in your mind, I'm going to fish the bank and sell out for limited bites? Or do you try to go where they're going, even though that is a no man's land at times?
Well, we have a lot of things that happen in the month of May. I mean, you got shad spawn. That comes into play a lot in May events on the region that you listed. It's just a little bit of everything, that I can remember. The swimming the jig on Dardanelle. There's just a lot of things that happen. And I think the fish are doing a lot of things. Like you said, you'll have some that typically are still spawning. You'll have some random ones still spawning. You got a post spawn thing going on. And that's where I think you can just go fishing and figure out kind of what's going on and find these little areas. And the good thing for me, that time of year, people start spreading out. You got the diehard ledge guys that are out there looking. They're going to live, the Gussies who love to fish out, and he's really good at it. We're going to lose a third of the field off of the bank because they're going to be out there. Creates more space for me. And then you got the 20 or 30 guys that they've marked every single bed on the lake. They're running circles around that. And then you got another 20 guys left in the bank that just get to go fishing. So it's just the time of year where the lake opens up. I mean, you can throw a top water. It's just, there's just a lot of things you can do. And I love to throw a frog. And a lot of those fish I catch in May, they come on a frog, really. And spinner baiting and flipping docks and that kind of stuff. But, I don't have the list that you have, but I would bet out of those 9 or 10 events, 2 or 3 of them came deep. So it's not just, that I'm just fishing the bank. There's some Kentucky Lake events, and that's another thing that we've kind of missed on the Elite Series the last 2 years is typical ledge fishing. We tend to move north about the time that these fish are going out. We're going to see one this year at Pickwick. We're going to see a true ledge event. But we typically move north before that happens. So, some of those top 5s, top 10s, I remember Kentucky Lake. There may be another one or so, but, those came out, and those are just events that when I got there, I make a pass around the bank. I'm like, oh, I don't think it's going to go down here. So then I start looking out, but it's just a a fun time of the year. And like I said, they're predictable to a point where you can kind of guess where they're going to be. I mean, they're starting to eat. There's just a lot of big fish on the bank.
So to kind of say that bait wise and kind of a couple of the events, bull shoals, I guess you caught them 4 different ways, but that final day you caught them over deep water with a shallow, technique top water. Lake Travis, you probably did the same thing with a spook there. You mentioned it, Neely and Gunnersville. Those were back to back last year that were both shallow. Rayburn, you were throwing a frog. I remember you were winding a frog there. Kentucky Lake flipping some bushes as well. I doubt you were fishing deep at the Arkansas River in the open. Lake Fork TTBC, though, I think I read some stuff of you. I think you had like a 37-pound bag that week or something like that. But crazy rain and weather. So yeah, and then Dardanelle, you mentioned at your win. We were talking about that on the phone because we're 2 Arkansas guys now. It was beautiful weather leading up to that, and then it got cold, and we saw the pits dominate, and then all of a sudden they didn't dominate, and that was where you kind of slid in the gap. So it seems like some of those events, whether you've won them or been in the top 5, it's one of those ones where you're getting better every day as whatever pattern started the week as the best one is fading, and you're just kind of building steam, kind of like we say Gerald Swindle does for his career. He'll never be in it to win it on day 1, but on day 4, he would have worked his way into the top 5.
Right. And there's something about that, the events, and it's happened this year, both in the Classic and at Chickamauga, and a lot of those events that you just mentioned. Like practice, if I were to rate all of those, it would just be like, it was okay, but all of those events I learned as the tournament went on. I can remember the Dardanelle event like it was yesterday, and I was just begging, hoping that I could catch 5 the first day. I caught 5, and as the event went on, I learned a lot about my area. I learned what the fish were doing, and I've been given some, I guess, blessings is the thing. I mean, I remember Dardanelle, my pattern was kind of fizzling out, and then we get a good rain, dirties the water back up during the tournament, helps me out. And same way at Chick, we get that cold front during the event. If we don't get that cold front, I probably don't win, because those big, 7, 8, 9, even 10 pounders come into play on the lower end. And I just don't think I was going to catch those kind of fish up the Hiawassee. So, I've had some luck as far as the way the tournaments have rolled out, but I just think, in May, you can get an area and be able to win out of areas for some reason or another. There's just something about that. An FLW on Grand, I remember that time of year I won pretty much off one island. There's just a lot of things going. A lot of the lakes that you mentioned can be dirty because of the spring rains and stuff like that. So I like fishing that time of year.
So let's talk about baits. I know you mentioned a few of the baits, obviously, that you like to fish shallow. Give me your top 3 baits to fish shallow that time of year, and then maybe your top 3 baits to fish for those early fish that get out off the bank.
I actually did a video on this a few days ago. It's real easy. A frog. That'd be number 1. A spinnerbait.
Popping or walking frog. Does it matter?
But both of those go in the same category. It just depends on the weather. I mean, both of them. I can't pick one without, leaving the other, and I'm not going to do that. But a frog, a spinnerbait, and, because of the shad spawn. And a lot of people, when you think spinnerbait, I think dirty water, big blades. No, I mean, Arkansas River, for instance, I caught a lot that event on a spinnerbait. It's just a shad spawn bait, shad spawn. You got some dirty water. You can do a little bit of everything, and then something to flip with, a jig, a creature bait.
You flipped a tube at Neely last year.
Yeah, but I mean, I pick baits, and I feel bad because I leave so many others out. So I'd rather just say a flipping bait, or a winding bait such as a spinnerbait, even maybe a square bill, and then a topwater, a frog. For instance, like you said at Bull Shoals, the spook came into play. So if you give me a topwater, a moving bait, and something to flip with, I can go anywhere in the country and be confident in what, because I'm covering all of the water column with those 3 baits. And then deep, if I had to pick 3, a swim bait, a crankbait, like a bomber BD7. Gosh, do I need anything else? And probably a big worm or something like that. You know, I'm going to use that crankbait to find them. I'm going to use the swim bait and the big worm to kind of clean up what I can't catch on the crankbait. Do you hear it thundering?
I do. We're going to get that tomorrow, big time.
I'm like depressed. Like, it's depressing. I love to go crappie fishing this time of year. That's kind of my deer hunting in the spring, you know, where I go out there, don't worry about, I take people fishing that I owe favors to and stuff. And yeah, the lake's 12 foot high, rising, muddy. And it's depressing. You know, I can only take so many naps a day.
Hey, I will say every time the calendar hits March, everyone gets so amped up for sight fishing. And I've told Kyle, Jessie, I said, there ain't a bass that's ever bedded in Arkansas in March because the rains and craziness of weather, I don't even pay attention until April. And with the way the weather's been in April, I mean, it's probably gotten really good over the last week of April and the first week of May, if we're being honest. But for you, do you have any memories and stories from that 2021 season? Because a lot of the guys, and I noticed this, I don't want to alienate anybody out because, hey, if you're at the top of the Angler of the Year standings, whether it's the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, the end of the year, you're doing great in that portion of the season. But there are guys who always start out strong in Florida and the pre-spawn, the colder months, the first 3 or 4 events. Then that middle portion, we really start to see a change as guys go from the south to maybe the south, but in the summer, and then the north, we kind of transition right there. It seems like when May comes around, you always jump up the Angler of the Year standings. And especially last year, back-to-back 4th place finishes at Neely Henry and Gunnersville, doing really 2 different things because Kyle got to see you at Neely on the water a little bit, and you were fishing that water willow in a similar stretch that a lot of people were. And you had to do a little bit different tactics to kind of get a couple extra bites. And then I talked to you about your Gunnersville finish with how much eelgrass there was. I didn't think I'd see you with a spinning rod in your hand as much as you did, but it was a great way to do it. So 2 totally different tournaments in the same state, 2 exact finishes. What went into your 2021 success to keep you in that Angler of the Year hunt until the final events or so?
You know, Neely Henry is a lake that I look back. I was pretty frustrated that I felt like I had a really good shot at winning that event, even before I got there. You know, it's just one of those lakes that I'm comfortable with. It sets up a lot like the Arkansas River. It's current based. And I was excited to go there. The problem is with that place, even though it's great, fish is pretty small. You know, so I locked down in an area, and it boils down to this. The last day, I just didn't get the bites that I needed. You know, I had a place that I was wanting to start. Swindle beats me there, which, dude, if you're fishing within a mile or 2 of the release area, you don't own anything. You know what I mean? Like, that's open for everybody. Everybody knows that. But Swindle got there before I did.
Some people still haven't learned that. They might know it, but they don't want to know it. They're like, "It's still my water. This is my water."
Yeah, you can't call it my stretch. So Swindle got there first. I fished across. But anyway, I really thought I had a chance to win that event. You know, and leaving that because it's water willow, it's swimming a jig, flipping a tube, frogging. We leave that event. We go to Gunnersville. And I hadn't been there in a few years. And after practice, I was just like, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I didn't. I had that one little area. I had some frog bites. There was a shad spawn going on there. So I thought I could catch a couple out of there in the mornings. But really, the only thing left was I could not catch them flipping grass. And before my Elite Series career is over, I want to win or have a high finish flipping grass. I love it. I've never competed doing it. I just want to do it really bad.
And when you're saying flipping grass, are you talking like punching or, that kind of
deep grass, like the Hackney on Cayuga. Like I'm so envious of watching that show whenever these guys are just flipping grass with braid and pull them in the boat. And I can do it. I just never can find the fish. But, the frog deal, I saw the brim beds and I saw a lot of fish around them. And really, it was just one of those in the events. Hey, I'm going to go catch a few on a frog. And then I'm going to go fish where I can fish and where I can see fish. And it was one of those deals where I started, I think, with a wacky worm. and it evolved into maybe a Ned rig for a little bit, which was the first time I literally asked somebody, hey, how do you do this? What do you tie on? And I just bit a dinger in half. And then I think I switched over to a drop shot, and that was the best way. But that was the best way for me to catch them. And had Caleb if you take Caleb out of the scenario, I had the bites to win the event. I mean, Caleb blew us all out. But you take him out, I literally had the bites. It was just with the spin rod, I couldn't do anything with them. Some of them, the 3s and the 4s, I could kind of control around that grass. But whenever I'd get those bites of the 5s and the 6s, I just couldn't do anything with them. But, and that's an event that I'm kind of proud of, like I did the things that I think that's me growing as an angler over the years, because I would have been stubborn and went and thrown a frog, even though I'm still stubborn. I picked up a spinning rod and I did what I needed to do to get a high finish. You know what the frustrating thing was? I remember that event. A funny story is where Caleb was starting in behind that marina. I don't know the names of anything. You can picture it in your mind, right? I fished through that area in practice because I got in there and I saw the grass and I'm like, man, this is good looking stuff. And I flipped all through that grass.
This is Hackney Cayuga grass right here. I can do this.
Yeah. I flipped it. Not a single bite. Well, I was leaving and I got a couple bites on a top water, like working my way in there. So that morning I started there. I roll in there. I start throwing a spook, and then I see this boat over there fishing around. And I'm like, dude, you're wasting your time, because I fished through all of that and I never had a bite. I leave and I'm out there in the lily pads. Well, I catch a limit, which is way more. I got like 16 pounds in the first 30 minutes. Well, here comes Bowman idling in. If Bowman pulls up to you during an event, things are going good, especially right off the bat. Well, I'm sitting there, here comes Bowman. Well, Bowman idles right by me and just keeps on going to the back. And I'm thinking, where's he going? The only dude back there is the guy that's
idiot fishing the grass. Yeah, what an idiot.
And I guess Caleb had like 422 pounds in the first 20 minutes. So tells you how good a grass fisherman that I can be at times. But that event worked out, and I am proud that I picked up a spinning rod.
Well, Kyle Jessie knows this, that if there's a guy catching them within 2.5 minutes of the boat ramp, Bowman is calling dibs on that guy. He's close to the ramp. I'm standing right there. I had to pick on Bowman for a second.
I was actually going to share a story from that tournament, because Ronnie, I think you got it backwards. I covered Jason the final day of the Gunnersville tournament there for a little while, and I'm still salty about what happened. He probably doesn't remember this, but we pull up, and like you, I was shocked to see him throwing a spinning rod. So he's working through this area. And then he looks over at me. He says, I'm going to run up here and work my way back. You just stay right there. And I said, okay, yep, that'll work. He gets on pad, goes about 100 yards away and catches a 6-pounder, but I'm too far away to really see it. I'm like, of course. Of course. So I just wanted to personally thank you. I've never got to actually tell you about that, but thank you for that.
I think he was being sly about it, but Jason, you mentioned 3 baits for the month of May, and you mentioned something on top, something you can wind with, and something you can flip with, just being kind of vague with those categories. You did pick specifics, but those all kind of seem, especially flipping water willow, maybe on fluorocarbon more so than braid, different things like that, or flipping docks or laydowns, and even topwater. You could probably do all 3 of those techniques with one rod if you had to. Like if an angler went out on the lake and was like, had 50 rods on his deck, Jason Christie could say, no, here's the one rod and action. Maybe you switch up your line, obviously, but you can throw all 3 of those things with this rod. What would that be for you?
The 611 frog rod. It's Jason Christie frog rod. I could flip with it. I grew up flipping a 610. That's weird to say. I grew up flipping a 610. That 611 would work perfect. I could throw a frog on it, and I could throw a spinnerbait on it as well. It's kind of an all-around rod, and that's one of the things that I tell people. A lot of people don't have they don't have a budget where they can buy a rod for every lure that they throw. And I have 4 or 5 rods that I use for multiple techniques, and that frog rod is one of them. I use it for frogging, obviously. I use it for a big spinnerbait, like a 3/4 and a 1 ounce. Use it for a jig sometimes if I'm casting it. And there's a few other rods that are the same. So, that's kind of how I grew up. I couldn't afford, I had 5 or 6 rods, and I would get out there and sometimes I would switch the baits. And like you said, sometimes I would have a different reel that would have 25 instead of 15. I'd switch the reel over so I could flip with it or whatever.
Jason, I want to go back to, you've talked about your general strategy. You've talked about the baits. What would you give a piece of advice to somebody? Because May is a time where a lot of tournaments ramp up. For someone new, to keep it simple, what is your piece of advice for fishing in this May period for largemouth predominantly? We're not getting into smallmouth or even spotted bass, but for that Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Alabama region in May, the most simple piece of advice you can give someone to stay confident during that up and down time?
I think you go to the lake that they're going to fish, whether it be their home lake or the lake they're going to for that tournament, and you literally look and pick out the best spawning area that you can find, or the spawning area in the creek that you want to fish, and you run straight to that spawning area, and then you start working your way out, because you're going to run into them. If they're not still spawning, they're going to be around that general area, whether they're on shad spawn or something like that. If they're not there, you work out to the first channel bend, and maybe there's a shad spawn going on there. Maybe they're set up on a row of docks. If they're not there, they're going to be on the first ledge out. And that's why I think, I don't want to say the word easy, because we all know it's not easy. It's just, they're just predictable. But yeah, it's kind of different than the wintertime. The wintertime you do it reversed. You start out and you work your way up. But yeah, this time of year, May, straight as far back as you can go in the spawning ground, and then just start fishing your way out. You're going to run into them. And if you don't, one of two things: you're doing something that they don't want, or two, there's just no fish there. Move on to the next one.
And Jason, you kind of mentioned this already, but obviously you talked about this at Chickamauga as well. Seems like in May, especially, you're going to have all those changing conditions, which doesn't necessarily mean that an area that you're fishing, the fish just aren't there anymore. They might move around a little bit. They might, adjust. And it's, something you already mentioned as well, was not fishing a spot necessarily. You're kind of in the time of the year where you're not fishing a spot like you would in the true pre-spawn or the true, post-spawn, like out deep. Any advice for as far as like changing conditions, how to adjust accordingly in those areas where you're getting bites?
I think you just have to pay attention to the weather and the circumstances. And like you say, things are changing. You may get out there and get on the shad spawn deal real hard, and the next day, your tournament day or your Saturday fishing day, the shad spawn's over. Those fish aren't going to swim miles. They're going to stay in that area. And there's something about me. I look back at all of the events that I've won. I've never won an event running and gunning. You can consider what happened at Hartwell in the afternoons, me running and gunning. I don't think so, because I was fishing the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
In a general area. I wasn't running the lake. I had me a 5 to 6, 7 mile stretch. I was doing the same thing.
Docks are a totally different deal when it comes to running and gunning, because you can't fish the dock you're looking for. There's not going to be 12 of them in a row. Right. There's one of the 12. So running and gunning is different with dock fishing. Yeah.
All of the events I've won, even the high finishes, have come when I settle into an area and I learn more about that area each day. And that area kind of becomes, your baby, for lack of better words. And you can you see what happens within the area. One day, this bank over here is really good. Well, that night, and I've seen this happen, and I've done it. You catch them on a bank, say the south side of a creek, you catch them over there, the wind's pounding in. And the next morning you run over there and you start, well, the wind's blowing the opposite direction. And I think as you evolve as an angler, like, you don't even pull over there and fish. You go to the other side where the wind's crashing over there. You just kind of got to watch and play the conditions. But I will say this, they're not going to swim forever. They're going to be around that general area. You just got to figure out how to catch them. And I think one thing that I've learned over the years, whenever you pick an area, you fish it for 4 days. Not only me, even some other anglers that's in the event, you learn how many fish really live in an area. You know, it's cool that every time I leave and go east, I drive I-40, and that puts me driving over Dardanelle, and I can see on both sides literally on both sides of the bridge where I won the event. And I just remember in that event thinking after the second day, I'm going to be out of fish. You know, at some point I'm going to run out of fish. And the fishing was better on the 4th day than it was on the 1st and 2nd day. You can't fish an area out. I mean, you really can't. I don't think so. I mean, you can fish a spot out, but you can't fish an area out. So that's my thinking. But, you know, to answer your question, just, you know, get in the area, learn it, and adjust to what the conditions give you.
One of the last things, Jason, before we let you go, we fished a lot of Bassmaster tournaments on different bodies of water. I want you to name one that you would love to fish in the month of May, that we've maybe been there before. Maybe it's a popular destination, but we're there in March or April or in the fall. One that you maybe want to fish in May, or a lake we've never been to.
We've got to start going to Florida in May. You know, I think I love going to Florida just because, you know, we're caged up here in 30 degrees.
So you go there for 30 degrees.
Yeah, you go down there and the weather's usually a little bit nicer and stuff. It wasn't this year.
Yeah.
But everybody that I've talked to, you know, I have a really good friend that lives in Florida, and I've actually fished some events in Florida in May, and the fishing is so much better in May than it is January, February. You know, the fish are done spawning, all that's out of their mind. They want to eat. And, you know, whenever we fish an event, we leave. You know, I talk to these guys. I met a guy at Harris this year that was my marshal, and he's actually texted me a few times, and after the event he goes, if you guys would have been here late April, May, there's no telling what you guys would catch. And he's sending me pictures randomly of him holding up 20, 25, 30 pounds. But I think if we went to Florida in May and did a back-to-back, I think we would see 2 100-pound events. You know, we go to Kissimmee or we go to anywhere, Kissimmee, Okeechobee, Harris Chain. I still like going down there, but I'd like to change that schedule. Maybe we start in Texas. Maybe we start on Lake Tenkiller in Oklahoma. I don't know. But we go to Florida in that, like, after the spawn and just have fun.
Well,
you know, get a jig on and just go flipping.
You mentioned it, like literally the Harris Chain in October for the College Series, 3 days, and it took 85 pounds. And then you go to the College Series in January before the spawn when it's really cold, and it was, 30 pounds a day to win there. So, but then we go and it's 4 days, 77 pounds. It's crazy how in between what's the best time of the year it wasn't. So that's interesting. Florida in May for Jason Christie. Well, Jason, I think we picked a good guest for the May pattern of the month and the fishing strategy of the month, because looking at these 9 events, that's roughly $500,000. That's not even counting your other wins in other leagues or just your other checks. These are just top 10s, basically $500,000 on this sheet of earnings from the month of May. So I think Jason Christie probably wishes, maybe we had 1 or 2 more events in May this year, but we do have one at the end of May at Lake Fork. Maybe he'll be one to watch. I'm not going to ask him for a preview of that at all, because it's going to be totally different this year than we've ever seen it. But Jason, thank you for joining us. Kyle, do you have anything else for Jason before we let him go?
That is it. I am all out.
Well,
appreciate
Jason,
appreciate you for hopping on with us. That was awesome.
Yeah, and I know that after Chickamauga, you said no interviews. Everybody's already talked to me about the Classic. I don't want to talk to anybody for at least a week. Well, we've given it a couple weeks, but this is kind of your prime time. We wanted to get this in. So thanks for joining us, giving us a little insight on May fishing across the Southeast and the Midwest.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You guys have a good day. And you cost me a few minutes fishing, but as soon as we get off here, I'm going to go out and fish in the storm here.
Yeah, just keep your rod tip low and you'll be good to go. So
no, I'll be in the recliner taking a nap.
Oh, okay, napping time. Okay, perfect. Well, we'll see you out on the water very soon, the next elite event, and he'll be one to watch there. Thank you, Jason.
See you.